I've seen some of your congressional testimony, and I know that some of the work that you do and the research you provide has strategic importance to the US. Do you find on your visits to China that people are aware of that? And are they happy to talk to you? Are you welcomed, or are you treated as someone who has to, this is an esteemed guest that we need to put our best foot forward in front of? How do you feel?
Uh, Thank you for being so generous. I just say I have certainly received emails asking me, are you being too critical of China because you pointed out that there are some strategic weaknesses in the economy? And some people even ask me, do you never do you plan to never go back to China? So I treat these kind of questions, even emails, with 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 skepticism, in the sense that, yes, I understand, in the media in particular, there are so-called exit bans and all that. But then, um, my experience is that as long as individuals, as scholars, we are doing honest research and we let data tell the story rather than trying to start with a particular ideology. As long as the research is not driven by a particular kind of ideology, then I think it is fine. And in fact, through my interaction with Chinese scholars and Chinese policymakers, especially those really good economists and technocrats, when you pointed out that, there are problems in your thinking, it's in private setting, of course, they are actually very receptive. They would perhaps, for people in higher positions, very rarely their underlings would challenge them. But for some outsider like me, they are not my bosses. In my context, we work in intellectual environment. It is okay. It's our nature to question and to try to question not just the assumptions, but also try to figure out what is missing.
Welcome to the HFR podcast. My guest today is Dr. Zongyuan Zoe Liu.
Is the Maurice Greenberg Senior Fellow for China Studies at the Council of Foreign Relations in New York City, a faculty member at Columbia University, and a well-regarded expert in East Asian and Middle East economies. Dr. Liu's work focuses on international finance. She's the author of two brilliant books, the first being Can BRICS De-dollarize the Global Financial System? And the second being Sovereign Funds, How the Communist Party of China Finances Its Global Ambitions, which is a 2024 winner of the PROSE Best Book Award in Business, Finance, and Management. Zoe, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Anika, for having me.
So let's dive right in. How does American liberalization of money via stablecoins impact China? And what is China's approach by comparison?
Long story short, I'd say the Trump administration's approach to liberalize or to allow the US dollar to provide dollar-backed stablecoins has triggered different responses from China. Most prominent response would be the Hong Kong Legislative Council's passage of the stablecoin bill. And then on the other hand, a lot of mainland financial regulators responded by pointing out potential benefit and the need for China to have its own backed stablecoins. And then on the other hand, you also hear Chinese regulators on the conservative side pointing out the risk of stablecoins. So long story short, I'd say the Genius Act, which was the Trump administration's, I guess, so far signature legislation for dollar-backed stablecoins, the Genius Act has triggered immediate response. I guess not just inside China. You see Korea, you see Japan and the European Union. But from China, the reaction so far is cautioned response, cautioned study. China does not want to rush into any decisions, specifically for fear of losing control. But that doesn't necessarily mean China denies the future possibility of Chinese renminbi-backed stablecoin. And this is exactly why Hong Kong can become a natural policy lab for China to, on the one hand, exercise the stablecoin experiment offshore while simultaneously maintain capital control on the mainland.
Okay, so I'm going to dig into that just a little bit, coming at it from a couple of angles. China is coming up on the end of its current 5-year plan, wherein it identified blockchain and distributed ledger architecture as foundational for a digital economy. Contrary to the decentralized applications of blockchain in the crypto world, how does China's use case of blockchain and expansion of DeFi, where it's been a leader, how does that work? And how do you think its strategic priorities will progress in the next 5-year plan?
Anika, you're right. Chinese leadership does consider blockchain as foundational, and this is nothing new. In fact, as early as back in 2019, the Communist Party top leadership hosted a Politburo study session specifically dedicated to study blockchain. And Chinese President Xi Jinping described blockchain as a critical or core technology for achieving indigenous innovation. And the leader himself urged for increasing investment to accelerate blockchain development in China. And in this context, of course, it's not surprising that China's 14th five-year plan, which ends by this year, identified blockchain as a one of 7, as you say, foundational industries for digital economy, which is actually like digital economy again is a very important aspect how the Communist Party of China wants to transform the economy. So long story short, again, blockchain as a technology has been prioritized by the leader himself and by the party and of course by the Chinese government. Now, this is where the feature of Chinese economic system and policy plays in the idea of industrial policies. So industrial policies work in China not necessarily in the sense that the government is going to draw a input-output table. There is an element of that. For example, in the shipping industry, back in the around 2009, the government put in the 5-year plan saying that by certain times China wanted to dominate a certain share of a global market. The important part is that once the central government set strategic sectors, then you end up having local government across China and the cities, different levels of administrations. You have given a green light to pour resources into these specific sectors identified by the central government. So as a result, because of top level design, China can have a very, very competitive domestic market. A lot of resources across different regions. You have multiple companies, in certain cases, like thousands of companies rushing to dominate certain sector. As a result, you have industrial planning, and then you also have a highly, highly competitive domestic market. Now, this matters for blockchain technology for exactly similar reason. Now, not just in terms of human resource development and tons of Chinese talent rush into the sector, but also private Chinese companies. For example, household name like Ant Finance affiliated with Alibaba, and the Jingdong.com is an e-commerce platform. Large companies like them, as well as small companies that many of us have never heard of, they all rush to develop their own version of technology and applications in the context of blockchain development. So this is where China actually has a very, very competitive blockchain technological development market. And when we look at some kind of blockchain patent report, I think CoinCub published blockchain patent report. And of course, China and the Chinese companies lead the world in terms of the number of granted blockchain patent. Then putting that aside, I wanted to point out that in many cases, it is safe to argue that perhaps the most prominent user case of blockchain would be cryptocurrencies. But of course, the Chinese government almost systematically banned the use and trading of cryptocurrencies inside China. This is sort of different from back in the early days, I think, around 2013, when President Xi Jinping first came to power. At that time, China dominated crypto mining and trading, again, because there are a lot of talent and also cheap electricity.
It seems that China is a little bit precocious compared to the rest of us because they've already done the mining thing. They've also done the pullback. And now I wonder if China is at all interested or poised in maybe a third phase, namely obtaining and keeping crypto reserves, for instance, Bitcoin reserves. I know that their own experiment with stablecoin domestically, for instance, the ECNY, that's been sort of met with muted interest internally because there's already established digital payment systems inside China. So the stablecoin experiment is almost distinct, but I wonder if they're thinking about it as a strategic priority to maintain cryptocurrency reserves or a foreign stablecoin account for China, especially when it comes to considering the expansion of trade and digital transactions globally. And I wonder if you have thoughts on what might be the factors in that decision.
I think that is interesting. I haven't seen evidence suggesting that the Chinese government, or for that matter, the People's Bank of China or any financial institutions would want to hold cryptocurrencies as a reserve asset. I guess, with the Genius Act, this is a regime change for financial institutions or non-banking financial institutions to consider what is cash equivalent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like dollar-backed stablecoins might join, I guess, cash equivalent just as time deposit or like the other example I like to use is commercial papers, maybe outside of China, or for that matter, for a lot of financial institutions, if stablecoins, dollar-backed stablecoins, there is this credibility of 1-to-1 peg guaranteed with institutional credibility, then it's almost good and as good as gold even. So from that perspective, a lot of financial institutions would consider that. And it also helps when in the current environment, investors, I guess since the Liberation Day tariff by the Trump administration, global investors pull out of some asset outside of the US market, and they are all looking for alternatives. Now the question becomes like, are cryptos or especially stable coins be part of this global hunt for alternative? I haven't seen enough evidence suggesting that people are all enthusiastic about pouring money or holding stablecoins or dollar-backed stablecoins as reserves. But what I can tell is that there is appetite in China to explore renminbi-backed stablecoins, but so far as a way as a storage of value, as means of exchange or transactions, cryptocurrencies inside China still is being banned. Meaning, I think this goes all the way back to 2013 when Chinese regulators, they started with banning crypto exchanges, and then 2017 they banned the coin ICO's initial coin offering. Then fast forward as of 2021, basically all sorts of crypto related activities are considered as illegal, from either trading to issuance to as a way of payment and so on and so forth. But that said, there were a few court cases in China, like again, prominent tech hubs like Shenzhen, like Hangzhou. These court cases did clarify, saying that Chinese residents, Chinese citizens, they are entitled, they have the legal right to own cryptocurrencies as, quote, virtual property. But again, as individuals, right? For financial institutions, they are barred from handling all sorts of transactions. So from that perspective, if you are a financial institution, either a bank or insurance company, and you hold crypto assets and you cannot use them for any purposes. So what use that could be, it's not going to be liquid, and you cannot use it for payment. And the government does not allow, as the current legal framework, the government does not allow financial institutions to use it in any context. So from that perspective, I haven't seen any appetite in terms, at least from regulatory perspective, to change that. And recent development actually seems to confirm this in terms of mainland regulators' skepticism against broader experiment with cryptocurrency or stablecoin currency circulation in mainland China. On the one hand, you have Central Bank Governor Pan Gongsheng. He spoke at Zoe Finance Summit right after the stablecoin bill passed in Hong Kong. On the one hand, he did acknowledge, there are benefits facilitating transactions, reduce transaction costs and efficiency gains, but he also warned the risk associated with it. And then on top of that, the more senior, although they are retired, but they are still very much respected and relevant former central bank governors Yi Gang and Zhou Xiaochuan at internal conferences, they expressed their deep concern and skepticism about cryptocurrencies, including stablecoins. And then on top of that, even have a Hong Kong Stock Exchange president came out and wrote an article talking about the need to curb the hype against stablecoin enthusiasm. And then, of course, the Chinese regulators also issued notice to tell Chinese stock brokerage firms or financial service providers, saying that, folks, you guys can no longer do seminars or advertise for the benefits of cryptocurrencies. So from that perspective, I'd say for mainland to increase or to allow or to incorporate cryptocurrencies or stable coins as reserve currency or as asset seems to be the appetite so far is limited.
Wow. So I have two follow-up questions that are wildly different.
All right.
So the first is, you mentioned the courts, and I find it really interesting that the courts have given individuals the ability to hold crypto if they want to, and strictly limited the financial institutions from doing that. And I guess, being a complete China novice, my first question is, are the courts independent of the government? Is it really, they're just sort of an instrument of the government and the power is centralized? And then the second question is, do you see individuals being able to access and invest in crypto-based secondary assets and ETFs, which could be a source of increasing wealth for a lot of people if they do have access, even if it's in a foreign market?
The first part is about court and to what extent they are independent.
Yes.
I guess overall speaking, in China, everything is under the leadership of the Communist Party of China. So it is not, it's very different from, say, the executive legislature and just like the three branch power separation or the checks and the balances, right? Everything follows the party's leadership. So from that perspective, one can comfortably argue that Chinese courts and the court system is designed by the party and is under the leadership of the party. And it is hard for me to imagine a Chinese court or a Chinese judge is not a party member. So that's that. And in these specific cases, I don't remember every case, but the case I remember is the Shenzhen case. It's fairly recent. It's I think the case was ruled a few years ago, fairly recent. And that court decision was Shenzhen Court of International Arbitration. And that particular decision decided in similar vein, like previous cases in Hangzhou or in Shanghai, they decided that, individual Chinese citizens are entitled, they have the legal right. It's not illegal to own cryptocurrencies as a virtual asset. If you ask the court themselves, they would say they try to make judgment without any external or internal influence. They try to be independent as much as they can. And even if the NDRC, the National Development and Regulatory Commission, the NDRC, banned additional funding for crypto mining activities and even designated the crypto mining industry as an industry to be phased out, meaning like eventually you want to eliminate it. China does have property law, and property law protect individuals' property in the Chinese context. So if court decision saying that these are virtual assets and are legal for individuals to own, then I guess the ruling means individuals, if you already have crypto asset, you can own it. Now, how you have obtained it, obviously without mining inside of China, you cannot legally obtain it from China. But if you obtain or you own through other channels overseas, that again, as long as individuals own it, and as long as you own it not through illegal activities, so that is all legal. I guess this is actually related to your second question, which is, in short, I guess the core of the question is, would having access to cryptocurrencies or stablecoins as part of, I guess, portfolio diversification strategy be good for Chinese individuals? And I'd say yes, in the sense that given that even major institutional investors in the United States or overseas have already considered Bitcoin or cryptocurrency or crypto asset in general as a specific asset class, then it makes sense for Chinese people as a portfolio diversification strategy to own crypto or virtual asset. And I remember talking with a Hong Kong-based stablecoin company founder. So the guy explained to me that basically the majority, like over half of people working in crypto industry in the world, over half of those talents, over half of the miners, the coders, are Chinese people. And interestingly enough, a high school friend of mine, he used to work in Hong Kong and then moved a few years ago before all these Hong Kong sandbox. From there, he moved to Singapore and ran a cryptocurrency exchange. And then you also see a lot of Chinese diaspora being very active in UAE, so-called capital of capital, working again on crypto asset, crypto mining. So from that perspective, to the extent of as leaky as capital control can be in the context of China, rich people always find ways to move their money overseas. I think people can always find a way to own or trade cryptocurrencies overseas. Given that I think so far this year, Hong Kong stock market and Chinese mainland stock market, the performance has been good. So as long as folks are not investing in property sector, they have better options, at least this year, for the equity market, and perhaps enthusiasm for cryptocurrency could be another way, or for that matter, stable coins, as a way to make higher investment return if managed appropriately. And if the government allows it, people have more money, they have better confidence in the economy, or at least have better confidence in household balance sheet. It's good to boost household consumption. From that perspective, it is not a bad idea to, at the macro scheme, to address China's underconsumption problem. But then those are all very high level kind of theoretical argument. I do have to point out that in between, up until China banned crypto mining industry, there were a short period of time when a lot of grandmas, they became cryptocurrency miner enthusiasm. It's like I remember there was this period of time, my friends called me up. Hey, Zoe, my parents asked me about this kind of coin or that kind of coin, which coins that I've never heard of. And apparently there are, I'm not exactly sure, I'm sure not all of them are scammers, but this has become a very big scam that has trapped a lot of money from Chinese retirees. If the government crack down, so there is an element of anti-fraud, illicit financial activities. There is that element in when the Chinese government wanted to crack it down. But then on top of that, of course, there is the concern of stable coins being freely moving across border, hence significantly undermine the party's ability to monitor financial flows and to basically debase the party's centrality in credit allocation in the Chinese financial system.
My conversation with Dr. Liu went twice as long as the usual podcast episode, so we split it up into 2 parts. Stay tuned next month for more on China, where we will discuss their sovereign wealth fund and the role of FDI in China's plans for economic progress. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes or updates from HFR.com.